Welcome to the Wander Quilt Along. I'm Trish.
And I'm Jenifer.
And this is week 1 where it's all about selvages. We're going to tackle and show you guys how we piece these blocks. And then we have a couple of other examples here.
This cute little spoolin' around block Trish made in all monochromatic selvages. And it looks really cute on the spool of thread. Can you see that? All right.
Yeah, you could make it really if you had like all selvages from like all red fabric, so you just have little red stripes. That would be super cute. So I might be inspired. Another quilt from my list. And then here's another quilt using selvages. So it's not bound yet. So these are just plus blocks, every other block. And when I made them, I just had a square of fabric, cut it one direction, pieced the salvages right sides, or the fabric side of the salvage right sides together, pressed it, and then top stitched, which we'll show you how to do that. And then once I had all that together, just cut it the other way and then trimmed it to size. So those are 2 fun salvage projects, and this will be a third.
Yep. So we're heading over to watch how Trish shows me to make the selvage hexies, because I've never done this before and I'm excited to learn.
I'm going to show you how I lay out salvages for the Wander quilt. So first I want to mark off an area of roughly the size of the hexagons, and you can find that size in the pattern. I just want it a little bigger because I just want to know that I've covered enough area with my salvages, but making them in the shape of a hexagon allows me to use my little pieces of salvage at the top of the bottom and not waste so much. So here, either line your 30-degree line up with the vertical lines on your mat, or the 60-degree with the horizontal lines on your mat, or you just play with it until you figure it out. Again, it doesn't have to be precise. It's just to give you an estimate. Okay, so when I start, I'm going to start at the bottom and build up. And this first piece just needs to be long enough to cover that space. And I like to start with a regular piece of fabric. And this allows me some wiggle room and trimming. And it's where I'm going to attach the bottom hexagon to this block. And you don't want to attach it to a piece of salvage because that salvage is really thick. Then you just continue to build up, and you want to overlap them by 1/4 of an inch. And some pieces can have lots of the print on it. Some might have a little bit of the print on it. I do kind of go for the interesting pieces of salvage rather than the blank spaces, but again, that's a luxury of having a lot of salvages saved up. So just keep building them up. For this quilt, I'm not really worrying about colors. You might want to worry about colors, or you might not. Again, depending upon how much you have in this space, depends on how much you're going to see anyway. And I will press these again before I stitch them down because I want them as flat as possible. And they do, salvages like to curve, like this one you can see, because this is such a tight weave here, it tends to naturally bend. So when I press that, I'll try to pull it straight. Now here, I'm going to put in a solid piece of fabric. Now when I sew these 2 pieces together, I'll sew them right sides together, just like I would traditionally sew it, and then press it open because I'm stitching it to the raw side of that selvage. And then the next selvage will get placed on top, just like the rest. I like to end the top piece with a wide cut. That way I have lots of trimming space. So when I stitch these together, I will just feed them through my machine, and I want to top stitch the selvage to the fabric below it. So in top stitching, I want to be just inside the tightly woven threads, and I'll go about 1/16 of an inch in because I don't want to flap there. Now when you come to selvages like this that have this frayed edge, there's really not, it's not as obvious where that tight thread is. I go just on the inside of it. Make sure you avoid stitching in these little hairs. So now I will collect these and I'll just stack them from the bottom to the top. You can do top to the bottom, it doesn't matter. I'll stack them all up and then I will give them one good pressing, and then I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. So I picked up the strips of fabric from the bottom to the top, and now I'm just going to stitch them together. So my first one is just a plain piece of fabric, and I'm going to attach selvage to it. I'm going to overlap it about 1/4 of an inch. So if you want, you can check that, peek underneath there, whatever you need to do. And I'm going to center the two pieces since we're making that hexagon-ish kind of shape. And now I'm just going to top stitch, staying on the selvage. Okay. And sometimes the selvages want to try to curve, so I'm really just worrying about the first few inches to keep them straight. And you really just want to make sure your line stays above that final thread that keeps it together. And I try to stay off the writing when I can. Okay, I'll take my next two. Same thing, just overlap it by about 1/4 of an inch. Make sure it's centered and keep going. So I'm going to continue and just do pairs all the way down. So this one I want to just center the pencils. And then again, I'm doing a plain fabric, but it's on the selvage side. So I'll just top stitch that down. Okay, so everything's paired. I'm just going to go to the beginning and start pairing the pairs up. So I know this is my bottom. And I'll center them. So we're to this piece, And this is where we're joining the top of the selvage to the regular fabric. So this is just regular old right sides together. And you're not matching any points or anything, so 1/4 inch is not even that important. That's my top piece, and I'm going to have to use your little scrap here. This is my bottom. And this. The last piece on here. So I'm going to at least find a new center because some of these have gotten off, but these ends really matter because they're the smallest pieces. So if you want to get back on center, just remark. Oops. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to go press this. Oops. And I'll determine if I need to add this or not. So I'll just keep this off to the side. Oh, I actually have 2 pieces. So I probably will have to add at least one of those. But I'll, again, measure my width and check it against the pattern to make sure it's wide enough. All right, so we're going to press this. And a lot of these, especially if they've got the dense stitching, they kind of want to curve. You just have to press them. Just fight them. And then for the ones where we stitch right sides together, I like to set my seams before I press. I just feel like I get a flatter seam. And then these little fuzzy ones, you kind of got to come at them from behind so they stay down. And then I'll measure this height and compare it to the pattern, and I think I'm going to have to add one more strip in order to make this tall enough. But then we'll be ready to trim. So Jenifer added that other top strip, so now it's got plenty of room. And it's good to use these wide ones at the top to give you some wiggle room when you go to trim them down. And so just continue making these. There are 10 in the pattern if you want to do all 10. If you just want to do the stripe, that's just 6. So however many you want to do. And next week we'll trim them up.